In this video, we're making this shop bag. Mine has a fabric body with a leather closure, but you could use whatever materials you like. The same steps will still apply. In fact, if you're trying to make a haversack or any other bag with this same configuration, this is the right DIY video for you. And if you stick around until the end, I'll tell you what it is that I carry in this bag to keep my flintlock functioning for as long as possible in the woods. We're starting with my materials already cut out. You'll need to choose what you want to work with. Most bags were a full leather body, and I'll be making videos creating those in the near future. For this particular bag, I wanted to change things up. I know that I want a 7 by 9 inch bag with a flap that's proportionally large enough to cover the top even when the bag is stuffed full, which is going to mean the flap hangs about 6.5 inches down the front. But that flap needs to fold over the back of the bag to be stitched on too. So I've ended up with about a 8-inch long piece of leather by 7 inches wide. I also cut my linens 7 inches wide, and after some trial and error and a little bit more measuring, I settled on cutting them down to 16 inches long. You can check my website, frontiertradingcompany.org, if you want a copy of my pattern. For period-correct inspiration, there is no better source than The Kentucky Rifle Hunting Pouch by Madison Grant. That book is an authoritative source on original bags, and while this one isn't a direct recreation, I am basing the shape and dimensions of this bag on a few originals from that book. Even when you veer off into your own creative lane, originals will help establish some basic parameters. Now I'll start to position the fabric so that it folds up, making the fold carry all the weight at the bottom of the bag. And when I fold it up, I'm not bringing the front of the bag all the way up to the top. You want to leave a good inch or two at the top of the bag so that there's a good-sized hand hole. This makes the back of the bag about 9 inches tall, and the front portion that folds up, that front face, about 7 inches tall. Since the bag will have a fabric body and a bark tan flap, there isn't much structure for the strap. So I've elected to sew a thick piece of cowhide into the inside of the bag to function like a spine, and I dyed that leather to match the bark tan. My next consideration is for the rough edges along the handhole. Linen is notorious for its ability to fringe, so it's going to be very important to secure that edge. To do this, I'm using office clips to fold the ends completely in. First one crease, then another tuck into the fabric, and then I'll fold up the rest of the material to make it easier to manipulate in hand as I start to sew. To ready my thread, I'm going to eyeball a good length, usually 2 or 3 times the length that I plan to sew, plus enough to manage the needle in hand near the end. And I'm going to wax the thread to stiffen it up and make it easier to work with using this little piece of beeswax. I'm going to backstitch across the opening. A backstitch produces one side of very sightly, even stitching, and one side that doesn't look so good. If you're not familiar with the backstitch, I would point you to a variety of tutorials online, but especially those from Burnley and Trowbridge. These videos can get you confident with a few simple sewing techniques that you'll need if you start sewing bags like this one. For this job, I want to be sure that the best looking side of the backstitching faces the outside of the bag so that the utility side of the stitch is hidden. The backstitch is a strong, easy stitch that'll make sure that this seam doesn't come untucked, which would cause the opening of the bag to fray out. With the top part done, I'm going to lay things out again in that 9-inch back, 7-inch front style to be sure that I can accommodate the leather support at the top. And then I'm clipping those edges, and similarly, I'm backstitching up the sides of the bag. The hand-woven linen outer portion of the bag has a lot lower thread count than the liner. I need to run this backstitch far enough into the fabric that the hand-woven linen portion can't pull out of the stitching. As I complete one side, you'll see that I'm opening up the bag to check on that outer portion. I want to be sure that it's getting firmly stitched into the bag. Unfortunately, it looks like I didn't quite get enough of one little spot, so I try reinforcing it while the bag is inside out, but I can't seem to bite enough fabric to really pull it back in without altering the shape of the bag. The inner linen liner is completely secured, so the only issue is cosmetic. I'll make a mental note to come back to that later. Sometimes I like to let little errors like that go until the bag is finished to see whether it adds character or actually needs repair. Now I'll turn the bag right side out and start to reason through attaching the flap. When you turn a bag, it'll twist the material that sticks out the top, which can cause a lot of tension along those upper outer edges where the spine of the bag meets the opening for your hand. Years of use can tear those sides right down from the top. So here, the stitching is going to become really heavy and highly redundant to be sure that I'm not setting myself up for repairs in the field. I spend about 10 minutes just looking at the spine and the flap attachment, thinking about the best way to tackle it before I dig in with a 5-ply linen thread dyed the same brown as the other materials in the form of a saddle stitch. Again, if you're not familiar, I would point you to a quick YouTube search. The saddle stitch is probably one of the most basic out there, and it works for pretty much every leatherworking application. This saddle stitch goes through that inner cowhide support piece, through both layers of linen, and then out the bark tan buckskin on the other side. All of these are positioned and clipped so that the linen will poke out the sides to be fringed out for a rougher look, and the bark tan, of course, is being positioned so that the smooth side faces out. This will be the exterior of the bag's flap. If you get to sewing without positioning your materials properly, you can end up with some really time-consuming rework on your hands, so measure twice and sew once. Sometimes these little bags kind of feel like geometry lessons. It is a lot easier to sew if you poke your holes in advance and ensure that pieces being joined line up. Going hole by hole with an awl as you work could add hours to your work time. In this case, I've poked the same size rectangle with the same number of holes into both the inner cowhide support and the outside bark tan flap. The needles will poke right through that linen that'll be sandwiched in between the leather, but that fabric does keep light from shining through those holes. And I usually rely on that light shining through to make sure that the holes are aligned. So without that, I find myself working a lot slower. It's pretty difficult working my needles through this thick cowhide, so as you can see, I resorted to using pliers to pull the head of the needle through. And one reason it's so hard to pull the needles through is because I didn't punch these holes. I only poked them with an awl or a pricking iron, meaning that no material was removed, it was only pushed away to create the hole. This is most accurate for the time period, and it's going to allow the leather to tighten in around the stitching over time, especially with a little bit of oil or a few wet and dry cycles. Another tip for any aspiring period leather workers is the tighter the stitching, the higher quality the piece. You don't want to perforate the leather so that it tears easily, but you don't want wide stitches that can pull apart as the material is stressed. I usually sew about 9 stitches per inch. I think it's a real sweet spot, but that's going to mean over 125 stitches just to attach the flap to this bag. Safe to say this thing is going to stand up to many years of hard wear, but that comes at a cost. It's also going to take a couple hours to get it attached, especially pulling each stitch through with a pair of pliers. Once the flap is attached, I'm going to fray out the 2 layers of linen around all sides of that inner support piece. It's pretty easy to get linen to fringe. All I'm doing is cutting and pulling out the weft fibers, or the horizontal ones, and leaving the warp fibers, the vertical ones. As I work these fibers a little bit though, I'm also starting to eyeball this flap, and I'm starting to realize that it's not quite symmetrical. This isn't something that bothered me when I first started, but at this point, I'm about 5 hours into this project, and with that much work into something, you'll find that you want it to look really good. I laid this needle across the face of the bag to really put the asymmetry into perspective, and then I eyeballed what I thought needed to come off to make the flap look a little better, but not too perfect. I still want it to have that raw, tanned looking edge. And so, since I did have to cut into that edge a little bit to even things out, as you've just seen, there are now spots of leather that aren't dyed. Fortunately, Larry Callahan, who tanned this hide, brought the shade of brown right up to about even with Fiebing's Walnut Color Pro Dye, which I use on a lot of my projects. This isn't any kind of paid advertising, it's just my 2 cents, but I have had some really good experiences with their Pro Dye over the years. It's oil-based, which keeps it from running when it's exposed to water, and I think that the color is a lot richer than other dyes. I'm grabbing a Q-tip and I'm going to touch up those edges that got exposed for a good, uniform, tanned edge look. Now the body of the bag is complete and the flap is attached. We've pulled that bit of fringe, sewed down the handhole. Everything is complete on the actual body of this bag, except for that spot where the outer linen is frayed out on the side. I haven't forgotten about that. But with the body pretty much finished, it's time to add the strap. I want a plain woven strap on this bag with no buckle. Off camera, I sized this strap, and I size bags to ride right at my rib cage so that the bulk of the bag rests right above or near my elbow. This allows you to run with your shot bag and horn. When you hang any dangling items off your body, you want to keep them as close as possible to your center mass. One giveaway for a novice in this hobby are low-hanging bags dangling down around the hips. Keep your gear tight to the chest or firmly on your belt. No dangling or flowing baggage. This has been true of woodsmen and warfighters across all time. Even soldiers of today wear plate carriers and chest rigs with equipment tucked as closely around that center mass as possible. This is what's going to allow you to run or otherwise be athletic, whether you're in the woods or at the shooting range. I ordered this hemp strap years ago and I never got around to using it. I think this material will complement the natural gray linen look on this bag pretty nicely, but like the linen, it's prone to fringe. So before I start stitching it to the bag, I want to tuck and sew the lower edges so that all that raw edge is contained. And this is a really tight machine woven hemp strapping, so that single line of stitching will do. If you haven't noticed by now, I tend to stop in between each one of these major steps to really scope out how things are going to come together. Now that that ridge of material exists at the end of the strap, that needs somewhere to go, and that's what I'm thinking about now. What I've decided to do is to let the strap drop down below the backing and face those little ridges inward. With all that material at the back of the bag, I'm thinking I can really anchor the sides to it. Those are the same sides that I mentioned earlier that are really going to get a lot of stress. Those can now be sewn right into the strap material for added support. It takes me about 20 minutes to secure the strapping to the material on the side of the bag, but now this is rock solid. I'm feeling really good about this arrangement. I think it's important to just get started on projects like this and reason your way through them as you go. You'll usually end up with a higher quality piece than if you had over-engineered it from the start and come up with some kind of detailed plan. Just get into it and work and solve these little problems as they come up. Since the strap is fabric, I only need to punch holes in the leather through both the cowhide and the bark tan, and I do most of my hole punching with this little lever punch that I picked up online. For now, my little studio here is in an apartment. I share a wall with a neighbor, so this lets me really get after the leather working without hammering an awl through every hole. I use my pricking iron to punch some nice little rectangles through the leather. Again, I'll be using thicker 5-ply linen thread to saddle stitch the strap to the bag. This time though, I want the thread white. I'll touch up the inside with brown dye after I'm done, but I want the outside of the bag, the outside of this thread, to stay white like the hemp strapping. One of my biggest pet peeves is mismatched thread color. I think it really shows a lack of intention and detracts from the quality of the piece. Usually if I'm dyeing large pieces of leather, I'll clear my table, I'll cover everything in cardboard, and I'll put on some rubber gloves. In this case, since I'm only dyeing a few white stitches, I'll only grab a cardboard scrap and a Q-tip for the dyeing instead of a bigger wool dauber. This allows me to apply the dye very precisely so that these stitches don't stick out so much. Once I'm done, I'll pick up a little extra dye and just rub it into the leather around the stitching so that whatever ran off as I blotted that dye around earlier doesn't show darker after it's dried. And with that, I'm essentially done. I keep seeing that frayed out area along the right side of the bag, and I've been thinking about it as I've been working on the strap here. I decided I'm not too worried about it. That little inconsistency, I think, adds a little bit of character, and I can always mend it later if need be, especially because the inner linen liner is still perfectly intact. I'm back now to show you some of the documentable gear that the longhunters, backwoods scouts, and frontiersmen of the 18th century would have carried in their shot bags. Gear that I carry on my own outdoor camps that keeps my flintlock operational in the woods for as long as possible. There's actually quite a lot in this bag. I think you'll be surprised, but as you can see, it fits in there pretty nicely. Today I'm carrying a wingbone turkey call, a bag mold by Larry Callahan with a cutter for the stem or the sprue on a freshly poured round ball, a vise for my mainspring. This one, to my understanding, is more period correct than the modern machined ones, of course, but a hand-forged one of any variety would do. A bag mold that fits on the end of a stick for melting leading gets into round ball. Of course, I have a handful of finished round ball. A linen rag for cleaning, a tin oiler for bear grease, a cleaning implement that screws together, also done by Larry Callahan, some pre-cut patch material, since what mentors I've discussed it with suggest that cutting patch at the muzzle was of a little later period, some fresh gun flints, and another simple toe worm cleaning jag that I carry with my fowler. All of this with a horn, powder measure, a pick, and some extra lead,
and you'd be good to go for a very, very long time in the woods. Now, finally, in hindsight, I might have angled these straps a little more to contour better with my body. But of course, you'll find areas for improvement on your own bags too. Live and learn. Start your comment with the words shot pouch so I know if you made it to the end. And as always, thank you for watching.